we'll open a door of discussion. Please utilize the raise your hand, and we'll let you speak, inshallah. I have a question if nobody is looking to ask or comment. So, Brother Ramzi, I just got confused because we all know that at the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Abu Bakr, he compiled the Quran. While what you're telling us that there were Sahaba that they had the copy of Quran, multiple Sahaba they have their copy of Quran. Is this a contradiction, or is this something that can work with each other?
Yes, this is definitely not a contradiction. The compilation of the Quran in Abu Bakr as-Siddiq's time, and I don't want to get too much into it this time. I'd rather focus on that on the next episode, on the next discussion that we have, inshallah. But the Quran that was compiled in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, radiallahu anhu, arguably could not have been compiled the way it was if it hadn't been written already in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he relied heavily. Zayd bin Thabit, who was appointed for this, and the committee that was along with him, they relied heavily on the written Quran that was written in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and witnessed like the scribal writing that was revealed actually directly as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam revealed it. So they didn't accept any copies of that writing. So as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam revealed it, that specific copy had to be present. And we'll get more into that, inshallah, next time.
All right, I'll be eager to hear more. Inshallah. Okay, anybody else have a comment? For those that just joined, can you, Brother Ramzi, give us just a quick summary of what we talked about?
Okay, so we reviewed the last part. So basically we talked about the meaning of the Quran, the contextual meaning of the Quran, what the Quran entails, what it means, that it is the recited word of Allah revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam orally, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard it as it was word per word, understood it, and then recited it back word per word over the course of 23 years. The Quran was compiled by the Sahaba as ordered by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the time it was revealed. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would call someone of the Sahaba, tell them to bring their utensils, like bring the paper, what was used as paper at the time, the bones or whatever fragments, the sheets that they would write with, bring the writing utensils. Come, I have recitation to give you. He would give them the recitation, and not only that, but he would tell them where to put that set of ayat, verses. He would tell them, put these in the chapter that says such and such. That's how it was compiled over the course of 23 years, so that whatever was written early on would also have to be preserved and kept until the very end. Right? So it would have to come directly from the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ, written down in written form, and it would be preserved by the Sahaba throughout the Prophet's lifetime, and then in ﷺ, and then in the end of his life, that was what was used for the compilation, whether it was individually compiled or compiled as the group in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. So in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was no committee of gathering the entirety of the Quran. Each Sahaba on his own, or on their own, being man or woman, like we use the example of Aisha radiallahu anha, they would have compiled versions of the compiled Qur'ans, just in not any specific order with regards to the surah, the chapters, right? But the ayat in each individual chapter had to be in that specific order. And that is what happened in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Sorry, so just wanted to ask. So Zayd bin Thabit was the first one who compiled it, or was it ordered by Rasulullah? I think later on it was ordered, right?
No, the Prophet ﷺ ordered the writing of the Quran as it was revealed over the course of 23 years. Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anhu was only one of those who had compiled it. There were many that had compiled it.
Was he the first one?
And right now we're focusing on the compilation, the written form. There were hundreds of the Sahaba that had it memorized. So the memorization is something else. We're going to talk about it, inshallah, when we talk about the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and that compilation. But we're talking about the written form, the book form, or as was described by Anas ibn Malik, ma bayna ad-daffatayn, what is between the two bindings of the book. That's how it was described. what is between the two bindings was in book form, in that sense, with many of the Sahaba. And we mentioned the hadith of Al-Iraqi, who came to Aisha radiallahu anha asking to copy her Quran so that he can put the surahs in the proper order like she had it. And she told him it was not necessary because the Quran was revealed not in any particular order in terms of the surah. So as long as you're reciting each surah correctly, doesn't matter which surah you recite. You recite first, or keep first in your version of the Quran, if you will. So if that's what we mean by versions. There's different orders of surahs. So that's how they had it, but they did have it that way.
According to each Sahabas that they memorized it, I remember there were different ways of so this is how the ways of recitation came, because they memorized it, each Sahaba differently. And I remember somewhere down the line he called each and everyone to recite, and they were called to know which is the best way and to stick with it. So many others were rejected. So does this come after the compilation and everything?
Yeah, that's not accurate. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when we mentioned this as well, maybe I didn't mention it in the review, there was the Quran in its entirety was revealed in 7 ahruf, which
7 ahruf.
Scholars, the scholars describe these ahruf as languages, though they're all Arabic. It's like dialects almost. So that's the closest word I would say is dialects, but it's actually more like languages. But regardless, they're all Arabic. They were revealed by the Prophet ﷺ in those 7 different ahruf. So all the ahruf recited by the Sahaba would have been one of those 7, or each recitation by those Sahaba would have been one of those ahruf. Now, the Sahaba may have mixed and matched ahruf. So in other words, they were with the Prophet ﷺ when a certain chapter or a certain number of ayat were revealed in one harf, and then they were with the Prophet ﷺ when other chapters or other ayat were revealed in a different harf. So they would have their compilation of a mixture of ahruf, which is possible. It wasn't revealed to each individual Sahabi a certain way, but rather it was meant recite what you find easiest for you. Okay, this is فَقَرَأُوا مَا تَيَسَّرَ مِنْهُ. This was part of this ayah was mentioned in one of the authentic hadiths by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's a part of the ayah, and I think it's Surah Al-Muzammil.
Jazakallah khair, brother.
Very good.
Anybody else wants to comment or ask a question? Brother Ramzi, another question from my side. Just we know in the Quran there is a abrogation and nasakh. So if those companions were writing, how would they know that this verse been abrogated and remove it? Did you encounter this in your research?
Yes, I was thinking of actually making a whole topic on in my notes. I have it on nasikh and mansukh. It's kind of a complex topic. The concept of nasakh means abrogation, essentially, meaning a ruling would come and it would abrogate the previous ruling, or an ayah would come and it would be abrogated by another ayah, or it would abrogate a previous ayah. The concept of abrogation in the Quran, the nasakh, there's multiple ways abrogation happens. There's an abrogation of the meaning without the abrogation of the ayah itself. So the ayah is part of the Quran, it stays part of the Quran, but the other ayah comes and cancels it or overrides it, if you will. It abrogates it. So that's one version. The other version is the ayah is abrogated and removed entirely from the Quran, and the meaning of it is removed. So an ayah would come, it would abrogate the previous ayah, and that ayah would no longer exist in the Quran. This is from مَا نَنْسَخْ مِنْ آيَةٍ أَوْ نُنْسِهَا. Right? We would not abrogate an ayah or make it be forgotten, like taken out entirely, except that Allah brings something better. Right?
Better, yes. Yeah.
So this is the concept of abrogation with the removal of the verse and the hukum. So the first one was abrogation of the hukum. The second one is removal of is abrogation of the ayah and the hukum. And then the final one is abrogation of the ayah, but keeping the hukum. So the ayah would be taken out of the Quran, but the ruling that the ayah gave, or the teaching, it stays the same. It doesn't change. I don't have any examples with me right now for these specifically, but those are the 3 main forms of the abrogation of the ayat of the Quran.
The oneness of the honey. Oneness of the honey. One I remember is of the honey. When Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam he was saying that he'll make it haram for himself, and that was taken off, I think. Was that it?
No, that's a ruling about teaching the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to not make haram for himself what
yes.
Allah has made halal for him. So that's a different context a little bit. There's a more fiqhi understanding, or usuli even understanding for that. It's a more complex topic, different topic than abrogation or nasikh. Allah.
Just back to my question, how those that compiled the Quran during the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ dealt with the abrogation?
So there are instances where the Sahaba would argue about that, but they were met in the time of the Prophet ﷺ and dealt with. Like, for example, one of the examples, the famous examples, is the ayah of stoning the adulterer, the married adulterers. I don't have it memorized exactly. Again, it's a little off topic. I was hoping to look at it a little bit more in the future. But this is an example for that there was a revelation that came with the Quran about fornication for someone who was married, that they would be stoned. But Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he went back to the Prophet ﷺ to write it down and make it official, like to put it in the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ refused, said no, he doesn't want it written. Now, the scholars differed on this. Some of them said, the brother I think put up the ayah. Regardless, this ayah isn't, by the majority of scholars, they don't see it as an ayah of the Quran actually originally. So it was something that was revealed in the time of the Prophet ﷺ as wahi, but not as Quran in some scholarly views, and probably the majority of the scholarly views. Rather, it was revealed, the Prophet ﷺ said it to explain the ayah that was talking about al-jald, which is the lashing for the non-married fornicators. But then he explained that the stoning would happen for someone who was married. Now, some other scholars say it was revealed as part of the Quran, but then it was abrogated and taken away from the Quran, as the Prophet ﷺ said. That's why he refused to tell it to Umar ibn al-Khattab. So that's one example of what it meant. So the Sahaba would have issues with this, trying to understand it, but the Prophet ﷺ, like we said in Al-Ard al-Akhira, and afterwards he would confirm the recitations as they were given. So they had the official end recitation at the end of the life of the Prophet ﷺ in Al-Ard al-Akhira, the final revelation, or the final recitation of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to the angel Jibreel.
Okay, brother. Anybody else comment or question? Any last word, Brother Ramsey, before we conclude, inshallah?
I don't have anything I need to conclude. It was kind of a shorter discussion this time. It's a very interesting topic, and again, just emphasize that the Quran was compiled in written form during the life of the Prophet ﷺ, but not standardized for all yet. And the way it was standardized was even more strenuous, more, for lack of a better word, efficient. Well, no, actually, that's probably not a good word to use. It was standardized in a more complicated way. It was made difficult to compile it so that it could guarantee the proper compilation, so that there was absolutely no doubt left at all in the way it was brought together. So that if one Sahaba had made a mistake in his own version of the compilation, it was eliminated entirely in the time of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and then later on in the time of Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. So this is one of the more important things, but we do need to understand that many of the Sahaba had it compiled in written form. As we mentioned in the hadith by Anas ibn Malik, he mentioned 4 people at least that had the entire Quran written down cover to cover. So just something that most Muslims don't even know, that it was written in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Allah give you barakah and blessing and reward you for all the hard work you've been putting into this. We're looking forward, inshallah, for the next episode with the same topic, the preservation of the Quran. In the end, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from all of us and to forgive us, forgive our shortcomings, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير for attending, for your time, and may Allah reward you all. Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام. جزاكم الله خير.